Hey, what's up, everybody? This is your host, Caleb, and typically with me is Brandon, but unfortunately, due to some last minute things, he is unable to participate in this week's episode. So, before we get into the actual episode, we typically spend some time to talk about what we have watched and viewed over the past week. And honestly, I'm not exactly the one that brings the versatility to this part of the episode. It's typically Brandon, especially in this time of year where it's post-season football and mostly what I'm watching is sports. So not a whole lot to contribute in that area. The one thing that I have been, I will say, quote unquote, watching is The Pit. It's that new medical drama setup where it is filmed, well, not filmed, but shown in consecutive hours, kind of like the show 24 if anybody remembers that one. My wife has been watching that, so I've got parts of it and segments, but haven't been watching the whole thing. So, pretty good. Been enjoying that. Seems to be very well done. I've heard that they have some of the best and most accurate filming of medical situations. So that's kind of been something interesting to see, to know that as far as accuracy goes in these films, this is, or not films and shows, this is one of the best. The other one that we watched a little bit of as my wife was just kind of playing catch up, we watched some Law and Order SVU and saw the most recent episodes that are available on the streaming um, platforms. So that's most of it. That's kind of all I have to contribute. But we are in the middle of Stallone month, and we find ourselves here getting ready to talk about Demolition Man. So let's go ahead and jump into that. Demolition Man came out in 1993. The synopsis is: a police officer is brought out of suspended animation in prison to pursue an old ultra-violent nemesis who is loose in a non-violent future society. Honestly, that is one of our better um, summaries for a movie. Pretty accurate, pretty short too. So I think they did a decent job with that. Our cast, we've got, of course, Sylvester Stallone as John Spartan, Wesley Snipes played Simon Phoenix, Sandra Bullock was Lieutenant Huxley, Nigel Hawthorne was Dr. Raymond, Benjamin Bratt was Officer Garcia, and then we also have Bob Gunton as the Chief George Earl, and Dennis Leary as Edgar Friendly. Last and certainly not least, we also have uncredited Rob Schneider as the character Irwin. Definitely have to shoehorn that one in there. So, yeah. So this movie came out in 1993, prime Stallone era, and honestly is one of my favorites for Stallone. And it's just your typical 90s action, but there's a little bit more to it with this one because there's some added layers. It's more of a unique story. I mean, we have what you've got: Time Cop, different things like that. I'm trying to think of. Wow, I'm drawing a blank now. There's some other movies that kind of touch base on this, frozen in time, uh, come out in the future kind of situation. But this is a little bit more specific, a little bit more of a unique story with this. And honestly, works out quite well with the concept of the ideal future, non-violent future. And then somebody tries to disrupt things by helping a violent criminal go out into society and do their bidding a little bit, which backfires, of course, in the end. And then, of course, to fight violence with violence, you get the tough, gruff John Spartan called in to clean up things, aka Demolition Man. So, uh, I feel like this follows up pretty well with Cliffhanger, another great intro to a Stallone movie. Definitely not as gut wrenching as Cliffhanger, but just I feel like it's almost something that gets overlooked a little bit with the old action movies, especially like the 90s, that some of those just intros were so well done. And this is another one that is a good one that just pulls you in right away because Stallone is jumping in and doing a special ops mission to try to get Wesley Snipes. And then Wesley Snipes gets captured, but then he like pulls a fast one on Stallone by having the hostages there, and there was the big explosion, and so then Sylvester Stallone gets uh, tried for their deaths and gets put into the cryostasis prison along with Wesley Snipes. The one thing that is a little bit weird about that whole situation to me is I don't really understand how Wesley Snipes somehow got up for parole before Sylvester Stallone. That seemed kind of weird and unusual. I don't think that they're really going to try to explain that or look too deep into that. But yeah, part of the reason why Wesley Snipes got out first was because he was up for parole first, which was unusual in my opinion. But um, it's just kind of like an interesting thing here. I know I kind of skipped past just mentioning the cast, but as like we're kind of introduced to characters, um, it was I often forget this that the warden from the Shawshank Redemption is in this movie because it's more of a comical, a serious yet comical role for him. And he just seemed like such a tight, stick up his butt type character in the Shawshank Redemption. And I don't really know any other movies that he's in offhand, really. So it is just kind of funny to me to see him in something more like this, having well, I don't know if he had fun necessarily on the movie, but something that's a little bit more fun, comical in a Sylvester Stallone movie. So we also get introduced pretty early on to Sandra Bullock, as well as I'm already forgetting his name, Benjamin Bratt, which I kind of chuckled myself about that one as well because I totally forget that the two of them are buddy cops in this movie, and they also have that same dynamic in Miscongeniality. So that made me laugh a little bit to make that connection because I've never really connected the dots on that before. So, but of course, kind of long story short, already in the synopsis, Wesley Snipes gets brought back into a nonviolent society and he just starts kicking butt. And they the cool thing is they take the time to explain things when they easily didn't really have to. Like they could have made it easy and not gone as in depth. And what I mean by that is um having to find a gun. I mean, really, they made this nonviolent society so tight knit that they're essentially saying that there are no guns anywhere. Where really, like, you could have had it where it's just like, okay, well, like the city itself is really nonviolent, but really, if you go on the outskirts, like you could find some stuff, you could get some stuff. Like, I don't know, there's probably something comparable to a pawn store in the future. Maybe not in the good part of town, but no, instead, like they really took it the extra step on being like, nope, we are so far removed, which is funny to me because I think it was only like 40 years, so it wasn't really that long. We are so far removed that the only guns that you can find are in a museum. So that tidbit of the story I thought was rather interesting, and well done because they're not you have a lot of those 90s action movies that just have 90s action, not garbage, but 90s action cliche, uh, baseline, mediocre content where it's just, and don't get me wrong, like sometimes that's just what you're going for. You're just going for, hey, we're going to have fun, we're going to blow stuff up, and we're going to have a good time. This one had more depth to it, not saying that's anything that should have been like, considered for outstanding performances or great writing, but they put extra effort into it and extra thought, which I thought worked out really well. Because it's more so like, I think a good comparison for more of the level of depth that you get kind of in action movies is the simple thing of Wesley Snipes pulled a fast one on Sylvester Stallone because he had already killed the hostages, but they didn't know that. Like that's something for like typical action movie twist or complexity, where this one is just like, okay, what's the future going to look like? What's it going to do? And how's it going to be executed? Because we're not even getting in yet into the depth of the things that they kind of predicted correctly with this movie, which honestly, it'd be kind of interesting to have a little bit of a study into the movies in the 80s and 90s that predicted the future and which ones did what, because I don't want to give this one a ton of credit because I'm fairly certain that there are movies that came out before it that had some of these elements that they pulled from. Like you had um, self-driving vehicles, you had um, it wasn't necessarily like a cell phone. I guess it was more of a radio, but then they had no payphones. Like they had these like data centers, so it's not like your standard phone system. They have video calls and just a lot of elements like that where they actually were getting things, some things correct, some things too about like, um, I mean, it's not the same, but the direction of being more sensitive towards certain topics or certain things or certain types of communication, which definitely was not a thing in the 80s and 90s. Definitely not now near what it was in this movie, but it's definitely closer than it was in the 80s and 90s. So, very interesting, very fun. And they had a fun time with it too. I mean, for crying out loud, they had the Schwarzenegger Presidential Library. I mean, whenever you can get movies that are cracking jokes between each other, like I think of The Last Action Hero when Schwarzenegger kind of had the poster with Stallone in it. Uh, that I just think that those types of things are excellent. Like that's just all in good fun. And so that was funny to see. I mean, making it so that Sandra Bullock's character had so much connection with the past, and then they reference things. She had things in her office, she had things in her home. Um, was was fun to see and really added to the enjoyment of this movie. I think it actually adds to it more now as more time has passed to be able to see those things. Um, One little thing that was inserted somewhere, and it's bugging me because I can't remember exactly what quota was around and everything, but they mention something being on Laserdisc, which I'm sure some people listening don't even know what that is or was. So I just thought that that was funny that there was a reference thrown in there for that one. So, but yeah, we've got the action, we've got kind of like I said, nothing impressive, but deeper writing. It moves its pace pretty well. There are a few times that I felt like the action was drawn out a little much and they weren't really adding too much to it. Like it wasn't like um it felt a little bit repetitive in certain fight scenes. I think the final one kind of got dragged out a little bit longer than it needed to. But overall, you've got your 90s action movie going on. So, um, the movie continues on. Wesley Snipes was helped to escape because it was actually the plan of the I don't even know really what his name was. Does it say here? Um, I'm just gonna call him the doctor. The doctor character, because he wanted to essentially extinguish the underground resistance, but the police couldn't do it and wouldn't do it because of legality reasons, and also essentially they were kind of passive and they weren't going to be assertive. So he brought Wesley Snipes in to be able to do the dirty work. Backfired on him because Wesley Snipes brought back more guys to help him, which then they took over the doctor and just wound up killing him anyways to do whatever the heck they wanted. Um, a couple things that kind of made me laugh along the way. Of course, like once Wesley Snipes starts killing people, the running thing is murder, death, kill, MDK. A unique way to put it, murder, death, kill. Uh, and that's what they chose to go with. And every time I hear it, it just kind of makes me laugh and chuckle a little bit. But to kind of something I forgot to tie in a little bit earlier when talking about the museum section was they had the Hall of Violence in the museum section, which I understand what they would be referencing. And yes, that would probably really be in a museum, but I don't really know that they would call it the Hall of Violence. Um, like maybe war or something, but I don't know. It just kind of, with everything else being so like PC and uber sensitive for this nonviolent future, um, it seemed a little bit unusual to me. Nothing major, just something that I had in my notes that I thought was kind of interesting. So, but of course, the movie goes on. Stallone tries to, in the process of Stallone trying to get Wesley Snipes, he uncovers that the underground in this, of the people living under the city are actually people who connect more to him, where they don't want to be controlled. They want to be able to live their lives however they want. They want to be able to make decisions and enjoy life. And so then they form a bond there and they essentially try to take down the system in conjunction with Stallone as he's taking on Wesley Snipes, camaraderie, hoorah, and that whole thing. So he fights Wesley Snipes in the prison area where they had the cryogen people and they were trying to release all the prisoners. Stallone has the final fight scene, like I said, a little bit drawn out. Of course, you got to have a couple of those Macho Man moves in there and everything with the big fights and punching people 50 million times and nobody goes down. I did like the final kill element. Of course, you kind of had your 90s special effects there, CGI and whatnot, but it was, I do appreciate when they can make the final kill a pinnacle part of the movie, because sometimes you get those action movies where the finale is kind of lackluster. This one was pretty good, and I do appreciate how they executed that. So then everybody winds up living happily ever after, apparently, because John Spartan just brings down the system and everything's going to go back to more of a normal society instead of a non-violent society. The end. Uh, so that's a little bit of the synopsis. A couple things I have in my notes. Um, the soundtrack worked well with the movie. I did find it funny and how they used the oldies reference in the future, and it was all these dumb like commercial tidbit songs. It just fits so well with the quirky non-violent future. I think it was really funny that they added that. I will go ahead and touch on the awkward portion of the movie when Sylvester Stallone and Sandra Bullock decide to get intimate, but in the futuristic way, which essentially was the virtual way. Because everybody wanted to go into this movie and see Sylvester Stallone making those kind of faces. That's what we all wanted to see. So yeah, congrats. I appreciate how they put that in there. Not really. I will say though, if they with them putting it in there, they didn't overdo it too much because there are those movies out there, those action movies where they extend those scenes much longer than they need to. So this one was not the worst. I'll give it that much. So um a little bit of a plot, well, not really a plot hole, but a little bit of hole in the story. That wasn't super important, but I just maybe I missed part of it. Is that when John Spartan was taken out, one of the first thing that he starts talking about is his wife and his daughter. And I know that his wife died, but then when he was trying to get information about his daughter, he got cut off. And I never really got figured out closure on that. Like, did they say if she was still alive? Did he just decide that he didn't want to bother her? Like, it seems odd. And honestly, they'd be about the same age. If not, she would be kind of older. So that whole thing was a bit unusual. One other thing that I have in my notes. So one part of this movie that just always sticks with me. I don't really know why, because it's not anything amazing. But when Sylvester Stallone crashes the police car and then that foam fills up the car when he crashes, and it's like the airbag of the future and everything. I don't know why. I think it was because of the age I was when I watched it the first time. It kind of just stuck with me. It's kind of like a unique concept, a unique thought about what things might be like in the future. So, um, but yeah, that's most of it. And we might have Brandon share some of his thoughts next time. I know that I'll be getting to grades here momentarily, and of course, we'll make sure to get grades from Brandon so that we can document that as well. Um, just some kind of final thoughts before getting there. Uh, the acting and the chemistry between all the actors seem to do quite well. I feel like it was an interesting mix for all the people in the police station, the different personalities and everything, and it worked really well. Sandra Bullock for the I don't know the best descriptions to give it, kind of like the naive airhead kind of personality that they were going for. Honestly, that's what they gave most of the people in the future was that really naive um personality. She did a really good job with that. A really fantastic job. She executed it and she kept it consistent. And then, kind of at the end, she started growing from it. I feel like that's not an easy thing to do. And she did it well, really well. Stallone, one of his better acting jobs. Wesley Snipes, when he plays the back, like just I feel like this compared to some of the other villains that Wesley Snipes plays, that he fit this one really all. I wonder how much fun he had making this movie because it seemed kind of like he may have had a pretty good time. So, um, I don't know if I have that. We will be getting to trivia and facts actually before grades. The only thing is I don't have any of them ready, so we'll kind of be stumbling through that a little bit together. So, um, yeah, filmed really well. Not too much of a downtime. The consistency and the um feel and the atmosphere of the movie, the sets were all done really well. So one of the things that I kind of chuckled at a little bit was the special effects and execution of some of the explosions. It made me laugh a little bit too, how the movie started and finished about the same, where Stallone was running out of a building that was exploding. Of course, plenty of explosions and fire. So, but I think that's most of it for thoughts. So I'm gonna check out trivia and facts. There's a section here that we can check that out. So kind of bear with me because there are some here obviously that don't aren't really all that interesting, but Sylvester Stallone did describe the cryogenic freezing scene as probably the worst 5 hours I've ever had on movie sets. I was terrified. That was directly from Stallone. Um, Towards the beginning, when gasoline is everywhere and Simon holds the torch close to the ground, it should ignite. It's the fumes that ignite, not the gasoline itself. Yeah, actually, I kind of had was wondering about that because he was way too close, and with how much gasoline in there, yeah, that um should have ignited. So, alternate versions. Oh yes, I do know this because pretty sure Brandon and I have talked about this before. Um, uh, t- 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 oh, that's not what I thought it was. What I was going to refer to was the Taco Bell. Why Demolition Man Taco Bell? Because I'm pretty sure there are. So depending on the movie, um, I think it was like Europe, the showing in Europe and the showing in the US. Um, yeah, Taco Bell has a limited recognition outside of North America. So on the European market, Pizza Hut is a more familiar brand, so they use Pizza Hut instead of Taco Bell. So there are um different versions. So if you've ever noticed that or not, that you could come across that depending on what version you wind up watching. So I think that might be it. So bear with me one second because I do want to check um and see if there's anything else unique here. Two original choices for the leads were Steven Seagal and Jean-Claude Van Damme. Jean-Claude Van Damme was going to play the villain. Um, and Jean-Claude Van Damme wanted to play the hero, but then that caused conflict between the two, and so then neither of them wound up being in the film. When Stallone took the role, he tried to get Jackie Chan to play the villain. Um, That's interesting. I did not know that. Jackie Chan was a good friend of his, but didn't think Chinese audiences would like to see him taking on that kind of a role. So I would agree with that. I wouldn't have really wanted to see him do that. Um, Wesley Snipes didn't really want to play the villain either. Interesting. Um, but the director and producer met with him and convinced him otherwise. He hated the blonde hair. However, NBA player Dennis Rodman would adopt the look after seeing the film. Wesley Snipes improvised many of his lines, not surprised. The scene where he speaks Spanish after he is brought out of cryo sleep was completely ad-libbed. Lori Petty of Point Break was originally going to be the female lead. A lot of different food franchises were considered before Taco Bell. A lot of them were afraid of the R rating. But during at the time, Taco Bell even filmed some commercials that linked with the movie, so that's cool. GM was another big sponsor on set. I guess I didn't pay attention to that too closely, but all the cars were supplied by GM free of charge. They even gave the filmmakers free reign to use futuristic prototypes they had been working on. Very interesting. Oh, here you go. This is a reference. There you go. A subplot involving John Spartan's daughter was scrapped in post-production. The character was living underground with Dennis Leary and his followers, and you can even see her standing with them at the end of the film. The director thought it slowed down the fast pace of the film too much. I would tend to agree that. I think the pacing was pretty good, so I'm glad that they didn't complicate things with that. Uh, they had a lot of crazy ideas for fights, one of which would have seen them fighting each other while on fire. That obviously never happened. But the final fight between the two was mostly choreographed and filmed by both Stallone and Snipes. What in Kuwait? The final thing I got here is in Kuwait, the Arabic title of the film was Rambo the Destroyer. What? That's funny. That's funny. All right. Well, that's fun. That was a good amount for uh facts and trivia. So hold on. Okay. So now we talk about grades. And I actually need to go back because I passed it. And so for IMDb, we get a grade of 6.7. Rotten Tomatoes. On Rotten Tomatoes, actually, I kind of forget that you have to get both the scores. So Rotten Tomatoes on the critic score. Wow, this is the closest score I think we've had for critic and audience. The critic is 66%, while the audience is 67%. One of the last things here too, I think I forgot to review before was the budget was 57 million and it made 58 million in the box office. I think I have that right. I might not be looking at the source that Brandon uses, but that's what we get this time. Ha. So, we come to final thoughts and my grade. So, as I've said, I've had a lot of good things to say about this movie. Definitely, I mean, we're talking 90s action movie. Really enjoyable, really well executed. I like a lot of the unique stuff with it. I didn't even touch on how they were talking about in the future that they made it so that there was a lot of influence by the Japanese culture, which honestly, when you kind of sit down and think about it, I mean, it's been like that for a long time, even from the 80s and 90s, but the Japanese are always kind of ahead on things. And so to predict that there would be a heavy influence on it in the future, which I think still can happen in the future, um, was a interesting take. So, good performances. I feel like I believe something that we talked about with Jean-Claude Van Damme in Time Cop is that there's a lot of strength in the concept in the movie that helps it. Now, there wasn't a lot of I think Time Cop fell a little bit short um in some other areas. But here with Demolition Man, I think the concept of the movie is really strong and the execution was really well done as well. I'm having a hard time. I feel like it's not because I'm grading this in the aspect of 90s action movies. And there are quite a few others that I feel like are better than this. So I don't know that I can give it a 5 out of 5. I'm landing on a 4.5 out of 5. So great movie, worth time. Could be one of those movies where we sometimes frame it up on saying like, hey, if you could only give a few movies for people to watch from this actor, what movies would you say? This could be one of them. So, um, that wraps it up for this week's episode. Like I said, we're expecting to probably at least get a little bit of feedback from Brandon when he is back next week to get his thoughts on his grade. But appreciate you guys stopping in. and checking it out. We are on social media and we do have posts going out there if you do want to check it out for rock video rental. We're always out and about doing different things. So if you have any thoughts or feedback from episodes, feel free to share them. And I think one of the funnest things that we kind of look at and consider is if you have any movie recommendations. We've had a few come through that we have watched specifically because people have mentioned them. So always feel free to throw those out there. But we will be back next week to talk Tango and Cash. And until then, be kind and rewind.